going to conferences all the time is the main driver for progress in your skill set and also your relationship, and basically any professional can become a better professional by attending conferences.
It's not the standard, okay? It's a movie theater, but the visual is great and the sound is great, and I've seen a lot of room and space, and I think it's organized well.
Seeing all the people here today and they're excited about stuff, and you can see the energy and the desire to learn and do new things.
And I was positively surprised about the depth, the technical depth of the sessions, and how that makes the tester part of the team.
I think developers do benefit from coming to QA conferences, just the same as testers can benefit from going to dev conferences. You've got to have a broad understanding of what's going on.
It's really inclusive. I would say it's super diverse. People are really, really open and friendly, and it's really organized.
Conferences are well worthwhile just for the ideas that they spark in people. When people come back to the office, they're full of ideas and they're all energized up.
Product acceptance is not always easy. In fact, something that should be just a formal approval of the product can be a big pain. How to avoid common problems? How to ensure your product gains the acceptance? Let's try to discuss. My name is Karolina Zmitrowicz. I'm working in IT since 2005. Currently, I work as independent software consultant. I like to think that quality starts from the beginning. Join my talk and let's discuss the quality of acceptance testing. Okay, thank you. Welcome at my presentation. I'm sorry that I cannot see you actually, but I hope that you are there. I would like to tell you a little bit about business acceptance testing and the way that business can potentially cooperate with IT. So before we start, who am I? Actually, I am working as a business analyst, but I have a testing background. I used to work for several years as quality manager, sometimes product owner, sometimes project coordinator. So I looked at IT projects from different point of view. Sometimes I'm giving lectures and trainings in quality assurance and business analysis fields. I'm also an author. I wrote several books. I am a speaker at conferences, as this one, and I am member of IREP exec committee. What I would like to tell you about is actually business acceptance testing. So before we start talking about challenges and needs, we would like to understand or discuss the classic approach and potential problems that, let's say, that are a result of some kind of problems related with this classic approach. So based on this, we will identify problems, needs that we would need to address, and we will try to recommend improved approach. Before we start, we are talking about IT projects. So I'm wondering if you ever think about IT project success criteria. There are some organizations that are actually calculating, making researches, how many projects failed. And these organizations are providing kind of reasons for typical project failures. On the list here, you can see so-called top 10 reasons for project failures. And there are many of this kind of problems, like misalignment of priorities, like lacking of commitment from the management side, like lacking of good project management and risk management approach, and so on. If you will look at the yellow bullets, you will see something that is directly or not really directly related to business and business acceptance, like no measures of project success. So any project has to deliver something, some kind of value, product, whatever. And the problem is that in many cases, we do not see this goal. We do not see or do not know the acceptance criteria. So in this moment of time, the problem is that how can we ensure the acceptance if there are no criteria that the acceptance can be based on? So this is actually impossible to ensure that the project will be end with success. The next thing, ineffective engagement with stakeholders. Who are stakeholders? Our team, of course, but also managers, users, business users, product owners, sponsors. And the problem is that in many cases, we are focusing only on the interaction within the team and with a team and, for example, product owner. We are missing the business background. We are missing the business users. So again, it cannot be a successful project if we are not communicating with business. The last 2 bullets, no contact with senior management levels. Senior management levels are typically key stakeholders, and we are not talking to them. They are providing business objectives, business goals, also budgets. They are making decisions that are important for the project. So if we are missing communicating and cooperation with them, we are missing the chance to make the project successful. The last thing is something related to, let's say, of differentiation of teams. Project team, business team, user teams, these are not separate teams. And in many cases, we are treating them like that. So in a good project, we have a cooperation and integration between clients, vendors, sub-vendors, and so on. So these are the top reasons why projects are not successful. And this is what we do not want to repeat. And this way, let's try to discuss how a business acceptance testing should look like. First thing, how we used to develop things means software products. Perhaps you know this model, V model. The classic approach to business acceptance testing and, to be honest, to software development is something like that. First, we need to define requirements, define functions, assumptions, limitations. So we are doing something that is called requirements identification, requirements analysis. Based on that, we are designing system. Then we are going into deep details. So we are creating designs, higher level design and low level design. Based on this, we are coding. When the code is complete, we are doing testing. And this testing is done on different levels. You know this probably from ISTQB, TMMI, or some kind this kind of standards. So at the low-level design, we are doing unit testing. So testing at the lowest level. At the high-level design, we are doing integration testing. So we are checking if the communication, if the data exchange is working. Then we are doing system testing, end-to-end testing of the integrated software. And at the end, we are doing acceptance testing, which aims basically to verify the requirements. This is our classic approach. We think it will work if we will follow the following process. So again, at first, we are doing analysis, design, we produce requirement specification, we produce models like UML models or kind of architecture models, which in turn are based for development and internal testing. Development and internal testing is producing, first of all, test documentation, like test cases, the scenario, things like that, and the code, of course. And when the internal testing, meaning unit testing, integration testing, system testing is ended, we very often come to the phase called stabilization. So after we test internally, we are fixing all the bugs, failures, and so on. And we are trying to ensure that the product is stable, is good enough to show it to the customer. So it is stable enough to pass it for the acceptance testing. In quite often cases, we provide the customer with so-called test summary report, a document that is showing what we've done in testing, what was tested, with which result, what is our, let's say, quality evaluation and recommendation. And the customer, users or business is doing acceptance testing. The aim of acceptance testing is, of course, getting the approval. So in ideal case, after the approval, we are going into production. And the expectation is that in this moment of time, we can celebrate together with the customer. We can be happy because the product is accepted, the requirements are verified as good quality, the product is working as it's supposed to be. This is our expectation. Unfortunately, in reality, very often we need to face with a situation when the business, our acceptance testers are saying, this is not what we wanted. This is not working as we expected. They are reporting bugs, which from our point of view are not bugs. These are changes. They are complaining that they have no idea how the system is working. They are complaining that the system is not working actually. So in some cases, acceptance testing is something like that. Our great tested system is just destroyed. In our opinion, it is destroyed. And this is not the situation that is successful or that is good for any of the sides, either the customer, either the vendor. So the question now appears, why this approach is not working? And here we can identify, let's say, 5 common types of problems. I would summarize this like that. We have problems with requirements quality, and why it is important, because requirements are based for development and testing. So if the base is not good, the result cannot be. We have a problem with communication with business with us. We have a problem with late feedback. So the feedback is provided at the very end of the project. We have a problem with the involvement itself, as business do not feel involved in the testing, in the development process. And at least we have a problem with skills and knowledge. And now let's discuss these challenges in a bit details. Regarding requirements quality, in most cases, we used to develop every single requirement statement at every single function, input, output, technical things. We are documenting everything that is necessary to implement the code. The problem is that we are not documenting things that are really important. And what is important? From the business acceptance testing, it is important to know what is the business quality criteria, business acceptance criteria. And that is very often missing at the requirements level. So if we would like to document requirements in a good way, first of all, we need to think about the goal. Why we document requirements? What this documentation should serve for? Who is the target audience? And based on that, you can, let's say, establish the content and the form that will be relevant for these goals and the target audience. So for sure, requirements aim to serve as a basis for developers and testers. So developers from the description should know what to implement. What should be the expected outcome? Same story with testers. From the requirements description, testers need to know what is the expected behavior. They need to know business rules, they need to know scenarios, both the positive ones and the negative ones. And all these things should be included in the requirements definition. There is also another group of users of the documentation. These are managers and business. And managers use the requirements information to derive some kind of status information. So they would like to know how far we are with the project, what is the status of works, what is the status of implementation. So apart from the requirements description, we also need a kind of background information. This is called attributes, and things like priority, like risk related with requirements, like implementation phase. These are these things allowing us to track the status. From the business perspective, the problem is slightly different because a typical business is not really interested in functions. They are not really interested in use cases, user stories. They are interested how their needs, their business needs are covered, how they are satisfied. So from the requirements definition and the traceability to business needs, they are expecting to know, are their needs covered, how they are covered, what kind of risk that they can expect. So this is the minimum information that should be present in the requirements documentation. What can we use? What tools can we use to ensure, or let's say, improve the quality of requirements? We can use mechanisms of validation and verification. Verification is basically checking if requirements definition description meets quality criteria, like completeness, like compliance with agreed template, like testability. Validation is checking if the requirement statement expresses correctly what the customer had in mind. So validation is about asking if we are thinking correctly. So these are the tools that you can use to ensure the quality. The second problem is about communication. Perhaps you saw this image showing the, let's say, cooperation of programmers and users. The same image can be applied to relationship between project team and business. From our point of view, from IT point of view, in many cases, we don't understand business and their needs. We don't understand business context. We don't know business processes that should be supported by the software. What is even worse, we don't understand and we don't ask for explanation. We don't ask why. We don't ask for feedback. We are not even interested. From their point of view, from business point of view, they provided business needs. They provided business information. We created a software based on that. And they do not really know the functioning, the scope of the system. They provided business, we created technology. So they are missing all these things that were done in the middle. In this way, they also don't feel involved because they are in the process at the very end. And after all of this, we are expecting success. It cannot work. I'm pretty sure that you know this image. The first time when I saw it, it was something like 2005. And it was funny. Now, I don't think it's funny because it is still valid. And that is really horrible because this image shows that we are not learning from our mistake. So I'm really hoping that we will change it after the talk. The next problem, late feedback. So in many cases, the problem with acceptance testing is something like that. The acceptance is at the very, very end of the project. It is just before go live. In this moment of time, we often have to deal with time pressure, with things like problems with resources, because half of our team is already on another project. And the problem is that in many cases, this is the first time when business users sees the system. They haven't any interaction with us, with our system before. Of course, the result cannot be good. The result is often confusion because they have to test something that they haven't seen before. They do not know the system. They do not know how to use it. They do not know what functions can they expect. Very often they report changes as bugs. For us, this is bugs because the system works as specified. For them, the system is not working according to their needs, and that's the problem. From our point of view, this is a horrible situation because we are at the end of the project. So we don't have time for development, changes, and so on. This causes frustration on our side, on their side. The final effect can be regarded or considered in two scenarios. Either we are under time pressure and we release a system that do not really meet expectation. So in the end, business can say, great system, not meeting our needs. Or the second way, we agreed that there is a need for change. So we are implementing the changes and the result can be that go live is delayed. We are exceeding budget and schedule. So the project is not ended with success as the initial assumptions are not valid anymore. The second problem, too often business users are involved only in acceptance test execution, performing testing. They are not involved before. So if we will try to visualize this, it is like that. During the project, the development team is working. So the team is working, managers are watching and deciding. During this time, business involvement is something like that. They are sitting in their office, they are thinking about ideas, missions, and so on. And they are separated from the development team. At some point of time, these both teams are meeting. And the result can be not really good from both sides because the business expected something else and the development team created something that is not according to the business need. So again, this is not a very successful situation. So if we will come to the first statement, business involvement only during test execution, we should ask the following question. Shouldn't they be involved also during elicitation? Requirements analysis, when we are trying to investigate conflicts, relationship between requirements, when we are trying to document these requirements to model the solution. Their input here is really crucial. Same story with design. We don't have to wait with producing the software to show it to the customer, to the business. We can show the business, we can provide prototypes, UI mockups, things like that. We can ask for feedback based on prototypes, not on a ready product. Same story with system testing. This is not, a good practice to separate the business totally from internal testing. You can use their knowledge, their domain knowledge to support your system testing. And for example, you can use their support in validating your system testing scenario. This way you will get the feedback much earlier than in the end of the project. We need to remember that business is not an enemy. They should be part of the team, as we have a common goal, provide a solution with some kind of business value. These are their goals, this is our goal. So we should work as a team, not as separate groups of people. And the last thing, in many cases, very important and deciding, skills and knowledge. From the business point of view, business people, business testers are not professional testers. So they do not know many of test techniques. They do not know equivalence partitioning. They do not know perhaps decision tables. They have no idea about black box testing, white box testings, but they have business knowledge. They do not know your development process, but they do know business processes support that the organization is performing. So to do the acceptance testing, they need your support. They need QA support, development team support. From your point of view, you are professional testers, you know all these techniques, tools, and so on, but you might not have deep business knowledge. Because the business knowledge is something that is, let's say, relevant for the business domain. So in this area, you need business support. So in other words, the most successful teams are teams that are cooperating each other, that are, let's say, linking and exchanging the vision, the knowledge, the competency. So these are the problems. And how can we address these problems? Let me propose a kind of solution. What can we do to avoid these challenges, these problems? We can think about being more agile. We can think about involving business in more iterative way. And of course, we actually should take care about requirements review, validation, in other words, quality assurance and quality control. The first thing, Agile Process. I'm pretty sure that you know this picture. This is Agile Scrum. It is working very shortly like that we have a product owner who's thinking about the product. We have a product backlog, a list of requirements. And these requirements are prioritized and are planned for a specific sprint iteration to be implemented. And the goal of a sprint is to provide potentially shippable product increments. So a piece of software that can be actually delivered to the customer on the production. We can also talk about some kind of ceremonies like sprint retrospective, sprint review. This is Agile Scrum. And this is working like that after each iteration, you can have the feedback. You can communicate with the customer. You can show the outcome of work. You may think that, okay, I'm not Agile. So what should I do in this case? The problem is that you don't have to be Agile to apply so good practices. So there are at least several aspects that are totally not limited for Agile. Iterative approach. You can apply iteration even to traditional software development methods. The clue is that you need to divide your big project into smaller pieces. This is iteration, nothing special, nothing new. In this iteration, you are doing some kind of planning, some kind of working with requirements, implementation, testing. Iteration produces something. This something can be shown to the customer, can be validated with the customer, with the business. Another thing that is not limited for Agile, frequent communication. Even if you are working in waterfall, it doesn't prevent you from communicating with customer. You can also ask the customer for feedback. You can also always communicate with business. You can always ask for validating some requirements. This is all matter of kind of decisions and planning, because this communication iterations need to be established in the project planning. The next thing here, requirements validation, so quality control. This is again something that should not be limited for Agile only. Requirements validation is a kind of good practice that should be present in every single development process. So after you create a requirements, your business analyst or product owner or whoever it is, after creating the requirements, they should be validated with the customer representatives, with the business. Why? Because it is a very common situation that the description is missing the clue, the goal actually. So when we are reading the requirements, we need to ensure if we're written it correctly. The last thing, thinking about business context. Again, we shouldn't focus on functions only. We shouldn't focus on user story. We need to think about business context, like business processes, the users, target audience, the business environment, business limitations, sometimes rules, sometimes laws. This is something that we are missing. And without this knowledge, it is really almost impossible, in my opinion, to plan for a good acceptance testing. How can it work? Acceptance, even if the model, it is present at a single step at the end of the development, it's not necessarily working like that. So it doesn't have to be a single step in development. You can plan for something that can be called a partial acceptance testing. So you can verify the increments, modules, functions, bunch of functions when they are ready. Do not wait at the end. So if you are working in a kind of iterative approach, not necessarily Scrum, just iterations, you can ask the business for acceptance, for validation after completing an iteration or a set of iterations. This is partial acceptance. This way you are reducing the risk that at the end of the project, the business will tell you, okay, we need a big change because this is not what we expected to see. So, iterations. The next thing, requirements quality. What can you do to ensure that the requirements are good enough? You can use quality criteria. So every single requirement, user story or a traditional description should meet specific set of quality criteria. In Agile, you can call it as INVEST method. In more traditional approach, you can use IEEE standards to derive quality criteria like completeness, consistency, feasibility, testability. And you can check each specific requirements if it is written according to quality criteria. If it does, the explanation is very simple. The requirements is not written enough, good enough to allow implementation and testing. So it should be refined. What else can you do? You can think about business context. So ask yourself, your customer, your business, what is the context of the system? What are the target audience? What other systems are used or cooperating, interfering with the system? What business processes are we talking about? So the business context that allow you to state, defined what is actually the goal and the ecosystem in which the system is operating. What else can you do to support your business acceptance test? Business acceptance criteria. Without this, actually your business acceptance testing is not possible because from the definition, business acceptance testing should be based on acceptance criteria. Without criteria, you have no basis to perform the testing. You can use something that is called Gherkin, given when then format of defining acceptance criteria, or you can use just a plain text. And one of acceptance criteria may refer, for example, to a business rules or the response time or other non-functional characteristic of the system. So when checking for requirements quality, ask yourself if there is at least one acceptance criteria for every single requirement. If not, you should ask the customer, you should ask product owner, the business, what are the criteria that they will expect to ensure that the requirement is implemented according to their standards. And the last thing, very useful, is the 3 Amigos concept. So when talking about requirement and trying to verify the requirement, we need to do this verification from at least 3 points of view. Business perspective. So we are asking, is this requirement actually defining the value? So what is the business justification of the requirement? What is the value resulting from the requirement? So the business perspective is basically answering the question, why we are doing this requirement? What is the benefit? The second perspective, development. So how these requirements can be implemented. And the developer should now answer the question, what kind of mechanism, design options do we have to implement the requirements? So designs. And the third perspective is testing perspective. So the tester is looking at the requirement and is asking himself, how am I going to test it? So this is a question of acceptance criteria. This is a question of scenarios, positive, negative scenarios, exception, and so on. If the tester states that this information is missing, again, the requirement is not written good enough to be base for implementation and testing. So these are some simple tools that you can use to increase the quality of requirements. Putting it all together, the recommended approach that I think is working in most cases is, first of all, when talking about any kind of testing, business acceptance testing, user acceptance testing, whatever, you need to start from requirements. Why? Very simple. Requirements are the basis for testing, for implementation and testing. If the requirements are not good, testing will not be good as well. So start from requirements, take care about the quality of requirements, implement a kind of quality gates, for example, this quality criteria that we mentioned. The second thing, create communication plan and actually ensure that the customer is involved from the very beginning. So communication plan, who is communicating with the customer, with the business at every step of the project? Who is communicating with whom, about what? What is the frequency of communication? The next thing is shared responsibility model. So if we want to work as a team, we means as vendors and the customer, we need to share the responsibility in to some level. So the vendor is responsible for development, but the customer has responsibility as well, validation, providing the expert knowledge. This is the customer responsibility. So we need to try to build a model when specific tasks are shared between these both sides. The next thing, involve the customer and business. Take care that they are involved. They are at the meetings, they are at the demo, they are somehow involved in system testing, that we support them during acceptance testing. Do not leave them alone. The next thing, process for iterative acceptance. So even if you are not agile, you can apply iterations. After some set of iteration, you can pass the product for partial acceptance. And the last thing, share knowledge. Very often the business, the customers have no idea about testing. They are asked for acceptance testing, but they have no, let's say, knowledge, no workshop how to do it. So train them a little bit, share knowledge, and just instruct them how to report a bug, how to write a test case, how to execute the test case, how to report the results of testing. Share the knowledge and ask for knowledge as well. So try to collect as much of business knowledge as possible. And let me share, at the end of this presentation, let me share an example of how things can work. That is based on a real case situation, a real project. The project was mission-critical software for one of my customers, and they have an agile approach to development, a kind of Scrum. We agreed that the iteration will be 2 weeks, ended with demo. Release plan and backlog and requirements in the form of user stories were stored on Jira, and the communication was done via Skype. The software was basically a kind of workflow system supporting main business operations. The team was composed as follows. There was a product owner on the customer side. We had 3 business representatives, 3 business experts in the team. We had a development team, of course, programmers, testers, and we have business testers on the customer side. So apart from these 3 business representatives, there were also a number of business testers. And what we agreed, what was the situation? First of all, the customer provided a kind of business requirement specification where the desired functionality was described. They also provided a kind of models with the, let's say, explanation of the functionality of the data. After that, we had a kickoff at the very beginning of the project where the team could meet each other, get familiar with them. And just after this kickoff, we had a requirement solicitation refinement session where we took these business requirements and we detailed them. During this session, we also created the MVP definition, so the minimum viable product. It was everything was defined in Jira, and we agreed that the specific requirements will be detailed if necessary during the project. So before starting the iteration, we had a kind of refinement. We used user story to capture requirements, and we had acceptance criteria, which were defined by product owner, and this effort was supported by business experts. So the work was composed like that. We had a product backlog. So the initial product backlog was validated by the business expert, by the product owner, and based on this, we had a chance to say, increase the quality of the initial requirements. We have a sprint backlog, which was a subject to refinement that I just mentioned on the slide before. We have iterations, 2 weeks with the iterations, and the iterations created a kind of increment. And this increment was internally tested by the vendor and then passed for the business acceptance testing. So these 3 business representatives sat together and they perform testing. Test scenarios were actually provided by the vendor. So the vendor helped business to prepare the test scenarios. The business role was to validate the scenarios and eventually actually ask for some kind of improvements, completion, and so on. So the business did the acceptance testing. And from time to time, we also had user acceptance testing. So the target users also took this product increment and they did some kind of testing at the increment level. So we have partial acceptance more or less after each sprint, and just before go live, we have a kind of formal BAT, business acceptance testing, and UAT. And I must say that it was just a formality. Why? Because both business and users, they actually saw the system before. They saw it many times. So if they had any kind of feedback, questions, changes, they had a chance to report this feedback earlier. So the final BAT and UAT, it was something like filling a checklist, done, 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 done. After the final BAT and UAT, we had also a pilotage deployment. So the deployment in a smaller scale to collect feedback from the market. And the feedback was then passed to the business sat together with the vendor, and they try to decide and to establish potential changes and improvement to the product. So this is how we work together. And I must say that this team that we created, both the customer and the vendor, they were working perfectly well. At some moment of time, we even forget who is working on which side, who is the vendor, who is the customer. So as a team, we performed really well, and also the business results were very good because of this close cooperation and this frequent communication. So this is the story that I wanted to say, and I hope that you can implement something like that in your projects. Good luck. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your attention. And I think that this is a time for Slido. So just trying to, okay. What is most important aspect for acceptance testing to prioritize? Okay, to prioritize. I'm not sure if I understand this comment, but we're planning acceptance testing. I think that first of all, you need to know the goal. I mean, the business goal of the product. So as said, every project needs to deliver some kind of value, and you need to know this value. Yeah, this value should be documented in the form of requirements. If you know what is the, let's say, criticality, the priority of the requirement, you need to plan, you can plan for the proper acceptance testing. The other aspect that is very important, and we are not talking about this too often, which is said, is actually the availability of the business users. And that is why I said that the communication plan and then, let's say, the project coordination is very important, because you can plan for everything, but if you do not, let's say, communicate or share this plan with the people interested, it will be just a plan. So at the very beginning of the project, I would suggest you to sit together with the customer, with the business users, explain your approach to business acceptance testing, ask for their availability, and try to synchronize when they are available, when you are available, how can you together conduct acceptance testing. So for me, this is very important. Communication and business priorities. Just looking if I have another questions. Not really. So I think that now we can go for the Ask Me corner.